Welcome to the Sage Solutions Podcast, where we talk about all things personal growth, personal development, and becoming your best self. My name is David Sage, and I am a self-worth and confidence coach with Sage Coaching Solutions. In today's episode, we are lucky enough to have a really wonderful guest on our podcast. With Valentine's coming up, I thought that having a guest on who is really an expert when it comes to relationships would provide a whole nother level of value. So we are so happy to have her here on the Sage Solutions podcast. Everyone, please welcome Tannaz Hosseinpour. She is an established relationship coach who works with both individuals and couples on enhancing their relationships both with themselves and in all areas of their lives so that they can have better relationships with their coworkers, friends, family members, and especially romantic partners. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you're actually in training to become a relationship therapist as well, correct?
Yes, in training.
In training. Okay, awesome. And one thing that really caught my eye was that you have a little bit of a legal background, which I do as well. So I thought that provides kind of an interesting insight, especially the area of law. But before we get into it, our goal with this podcast is to share free, helpful tools with you and anyone you know who is looking to improve their life. So take action, subscribe, and share this podcast with them. Tannaz also has her own established podcast and community that she started in 2017, where she interviews leading experts to share insights on relational wellness and self-growth. But frankly, you're going to do a much better job introducing yourself than I will. So everyone, please welcome Tannaz.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be on, David. And yeah, I do have a background in law, in dispute resolution law and family mediation. And that's kind of what led me to relationship coaching 8 years ago, because I was really confused as to why or how we end up at a place where we're fighting over, who gets a plate and who gets a cup. But we're always, when we get married, we're so in love. So what happens in between that gets us to this point? I didn't like being on the reactive side. Kind of made me do a 180 and say, I want to be on the proactive side of relationships, which led me to relationship coaching, getting my certifications. And, over the past 8 years, I've been working with hundreds of clients and couples and, single people who want to enter into relationships. And I realized, okay, I'd like to take it a step further and started my third master's degree in counseling psychotherapy so that I could have more tools to help couples navigate relationships, because relationships are not what Disney promised us. It's not, it looks nothing like that. It actually requires work and effort and learning relational skills. So yeah, that's how I ended up here.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. It's interesting because there's a little bit of a parallel. When I was working in elder law, I saw how the death of a loved one could really bring a family together or could really split them apart, especially over small, petty things. And it's kind of another area where love and connection and relationships come in, but just in a little bit of a different way. And it always struck me as very, I don't know how else to say it, but just bizarre or crazy that people would let small amounts of money or small specific items break up 50 years of family. And I'm sure it was to an even greater degree when you're working with dispute resolution and even divorce. So I wanted to ask, with Valentine's Day coming up, we just did an episode on the 5 love languages. I was happy to do that with my wife. And I was wondering if you had any advice for a new relationship, a long-standing relationship. What is the number one thing that you would recommend people focus on coming into this time?
Okay, so I think I would say, and I say this often to my clients, your partner is not a mind reader.
Mm.
Express your expectations. Do not make assumptions. And the reason for this is we have five fingers on each hand. They're not identical. Siblings in the same household are not identical. So
Mhm.
people from different households, different backgrounds, different, family of origins, different belief systems, they are not like you. And so what they think you're going to want might be so different from what you actually want. And unless you express your needs in a respectful, loving, and invitational, warm way, and I say this part in an asterisk because it's not we don't want to dictate, we don't want to demand, we want
Mhm.
to express and say like this is how I want to be loved. And the Gottman Institute, Dr. John Gottman does such a great work on teaching us communication skills, and he has this idea which he calls love maps. And what is a love map? It's you're literally giving your partner a map of how you want to be valued, how you want to be spoken to, how you want to be celebrated. And so we want to set our partner up for success. But oftentimes I notice that they're like, no, he should just know. He should know that I want X, Y, and Z. Has he been living under a rock? And like I hear this often. And I always have to remind people, no, because he might have grown up, for example, seeing his dad buy his mom a cup of coffee, and that was their love language, and that meant something for them. And he'll come and he'll do the same thing for you, but that doesn't hold the same meaning for you. It doesn't hold the same value for you. So now you're disappointed thinking, my partner doesn't love me. And your partner's thinking, when my mom got that coffee, she felt so loved. So it's like a huge question mark of like, what am I doing wrong? And we get stuck in this loop of like, so you don't love me enough. And then there's like this, we go into different dynamics of like pursuing, withdrawing. A lot can happen. But to simplify it, express your needs, express your expectations, let your partner know what you would like. This is how I want to be loved. This is how I want to be celebrated. This is how I want us to celebrate Valentine's Day. Have a conversation around that. Give your partner the tools to win. Set them up for success. That's what I would say.
That is incredibly good advice. Just thinking through every word that you said and how in my own relationship, there are definitely times where it's so easy to fall into this, where you're like, how do you not know?
Yeah.
And we just get so caught up in our own perspective that we assume the rest of the world has that same perspective. But that perspective has a million things that make it different than everyone else's. And I think the most interesting part of that is how much stronger we feel that when it's somebody that we are really close to and connected with. You know, with a coworker, you're not nearly as upset if they're not understanding what you're thinking. But with your partner, it's almost like you put these totally unfair expectations, like you said, on them.
Mhm.
How would you recommend going about catching yourself or helping yourself through that process in the moment? If you feel that emotion welling up within yourself of like, how could they do this? What would you recommend for like a in the moment strategy or tactic?
Pause. Remove yourself from the situation because, again, I love to always bring science into what I'm sharing. So when we're feeling triggered, and if that trigger is really strong and it creates this physiological flooding. So physiological flooding is when I want to say something, but no words are coming out. So my body is in a very heightened sympathetic state, heart rate's going up. Like you just feel that it's like the heat inside getting more and more. Science shows us that, it takes a minimum of 20 minutes to regulate yourself, to balance the nervous system, and nothing good comes out of that triggered state. So when your partner does something, like let's say you had expectations for flowers and he shows up with the coffee, let's use that same example of a coffee or a tea, and you're noticing, something is coming up and I'm feeling really triggered. We know that, okay, the right way to approach this is saying, this was what my expectation was. Can you, like, getting curious with each other? Like, tell me what made you get the coffee. But in that moment, if you're angry, these words are not coming out. You're going to become critical. You're going to attack the person's
Mm,
character. The problem is no longer the problem. The problem becomes that person's character. And that's a line we don't want to cross. Or if we do cross it, we want to repair it. But to avoid that, to be proactive in our approach, we want to pause. We want to remove ourselves from the situation to help regulate. Now, in my own relationship, it's we need to take a time out. And when
mm,
I say that word, it means I'm leaving the conversation. I'm going to go do things that are going to help me regulate. Glass of cold water, rub ice cubes on my neck or on my wrists,
mm.
cry, take a
Yeah, these are
shower,
really good. Wow.
go for a walk. Simple things, but really help us regulate. Now that I'm feeling regulated, I come back to the conversation. Help me understand. I want to see your perspective. Um, so do not underestimate the power of the pause because we say stuff in the heat of the moment and it creates ruptures. And of course, we can always repair, but why get to that point if we can just remove ourselves from the situation until we can come back and say it in a kinder, softer, more curious tone?
A lot of what you're saying reminds me a lot of the things that we talked about in a previous episode when we talked about mindfulness, about, pausing, about being in the moment, about approaching with curiosity and non-judgment. And I thought some of the strategies that you just pointed out were really something. I've never thought about ice as a
Mhm.
strategy, but I suppose it provides an immediate state change and kind of snaps you out of that headspace. I really like that one. I'm probably going to steal it if that's okay.
Yeah, please, please do. Because, when you're rubbing ice on the back of your neck, that's where your vagus nerve is. That's how you
Mm.
activate the parasympathetic. So it's one of the fastest ways. If you don't have ice, take like frozen peas from the freezer and just put it on your back and you'll notice. You'll notice within a couple of slow, deep breaths, you start to feel more grounded and at ease. And the same happens here with your wrists. So, or just put your face in the freezer. That's powerful too.
I wanted to touch on something you said earlier. I didn't want to lose what you were saying, but it was a small little thing, but it just struck me. You said, set your partner up for success. Give them the tools to succeed. And I thought that was wonderful. I mean, it's such a good reminder that, like, you're a team. You're not trying to win. The point is you want them to succeed because you love them. So don't make it harder for them. We all get caught up in the moment, and sometimes that's when we need to give ourselves a little bit of self-compassion and not just, shame ourselves for it. And then you go back and repair, like you said. But I thought that was great. Are there any other ways that we can set our partners up for success? Give them the tools, like you said.
Yeah, definitely. So, in your previous episode with the five languages, that's a great way to set yourself up in your relationship because relationship wins, you win. Um,
Mm.
exactly as you said, we are a team. It's never me versus you, it's us versus the problem. Whatever challenge comes, we will figure it out together. So, five languages is great. Five love languages. This is how I would like to be loved. So you're kind of
Mm.
letting the person know. And the whole premise of the love languages is you want to love your partner how they want to be loved, not how you want to be loved. So it's like, if this person loves, quality time, making sure I do that, even if my love language is not quality time, but I want to be intentional with their love language. So you've already covered that. I love that. It's a great tool. So I highly recommend everyone to go back to that episode and listen to it for a refresher. Love languages. Another great way is to really learn how to express your needs and to be vocal about it and say, like, you know, I feel, and this is one of my favorite sentences, I feel X when Y happens. So I feel so loved when you pump the gas for me without me having to ask, right? So you're kind of telling the person, when you do this, this is how I feel. And guess what? Everyone inside of them loves it when they make someone else happy. It's just an innate nature of people. Like,
Yeah.
why? Because it makes me feel like my presence matters, right? That there's value of mine in this dynamic. So when you're telling the person, thank you so much for doing that, it made me feel so seen. Or when you do this, I feel that. I've spoken to many men, and they've always told me, and I'm speaking, from a woman's perspective, but I have a
Right.
lot of male clients, and they tell me it's so powerful for them when they know what makes them happy. Because it's like, it's very simple. Like, okay, they've created a formula. If I do this, she'll be happy. So I'll do more of this, she'll be happier. And it's like a positive loop that we'll get into. So
Yeah.
we don't want to
Positive feedback loop.
overcomplicate things. It's really just, when you do X, I feel Y, and gratitude, appreciation. We want to step outside of expectation and realize that the way my partner is showing up, they don't have to do that. They want to do that. And so I want to acknowledge that, and I want to honor that. And honoring is not submission. Honoring is the most powerful thing you can do for your partner. I see you. I see what you're doing for us, and I appreciate it. And it makes me feel a certain way. And I want you to know how that makes me feel.
Wow. Yeah. No, just really, really great stuff. So we touched on some really powerful things, some tactics, some overall approaches that we can take towards our relationships going into Valentine's Day. But not everyone is in the midst of a romantic relationship. Different people are in different seasons of their lives.
Mhm.
And for the individuals who maybe aren't in the middle of a romantic relationship, I think Valentine's Day can feel a little bit daunting or even lonely or alienating. What advice would you give to those individuals?
Thank you for asking that. And I completely agree with you. I think also the way it's being marketed, like the way
Mm,
Valentine's Day is being marketed, plays a big role in that trigger. But, if we can reframe the way we look at Valentine's Day, if we can look at Valentine's Day as just honoring the energy of love. Now, that can be love of self, that can be love of sisterhood or brotherhood, that friendships, those safe spaces where you feel seen, love of community, love of family, and just leaning into that energetic frequency of love. It's not necessarily about romantic love, but it's how can I tap into that frequency? How can I cultivate that? Even in my own life, one of my favorite things to ask my clients, and I love to remember to do this every day as well, is when I wake up in the morning and I ask myself, how can I make love to my life? And um, in a very romantic way of how can I enjoy every moment of today? So when I'm having my coffee, I don't want to be mindlessly scrolling. I want to enjoy that coffee. When I'm sitting with my partner for breakfast, I want to be present with them. When I'm at work, I want to be fully, immersed in that zone of genius. For me, that is love. For me, that is how can I love every moment of my life? How can I bring joy, inject intentional joy? And if we can just take this reminder and apply it to that specific day as well, whether we're with our friends or with ourselves or with our family or with our partner, it's not about the gifts. It's about how can I inject that energetic frequency into every second of that 24 hours. And of course, beyond, but let's specifically for that day.
yeah, one day at a time, one step at a
Yeah.
time. We often stereotype love to only be romantic love. And there are so many other types, like you said. You've got familial love, platonic love, self love, love of a hobby or of life.
Yeah.
And Valentine's Day, like you said, as the cynical will call it a Hallmark holiday. But, some of that does have an effect because it's very, very marketed as this is couples day.
Yeah.
And if it's really about love, then we can express that in so many different ways. So I've heard you talk about the concept of fighting fair.
Hmm.
And I would love to touch on that. I think it could provide a lot of value to everyone listening.
Yeah. Fighting fair. Fighting fair has a lot of elements. So, when it comes to just any type of relationship, I always tell people it's 50% the inner work that you've done. So it's your past conditioning, your beliefs, your baggage, your wounds, and it's 50% relational skills, learning the skills. And these are not skills that we were taught in school. No one told us how to communicate. No one told us how to fight. If anything, fighting has such a negative connotation. Conflict has a negative connotation. And, you know, if there is a couple that comes to me and says, we never fight, that's never a good sign. It just means that
Mm,
someone is abandoning their needs, abandoning themselves to please the other person. And so I want to encourage people to have arguments. But how can we have arguments in a way that feels fair, in a way that feels respectful? And even if we cross that boundary, can we learn how to repair, the art of repairing? So it's such a big concept, but to summarize it, fighting fair is a few things. One, I am going to keep the focus on the problem and not make it about you. And that's one of the four horsemen that the Gottman Institute talks about. So these are the four communication faux pas that you shouldn't do. Because again, research shows that if we do engage in them, relationship will end most likely in divorce, especially
mm,
with the last one, contempt being over 90% predictor of divorce. So the first one is criticism. So again, the problem is not you now. The problem is not the dirty dishes. The problem is you are a messy person. You are dirty. You are selfish. It's very you oriented. And guess what? If you keep telling someone you are this, you are that, they're going to get defensive, which is the second horseman. Now, if I'm getting defensive, I'm going to show up in two ways. Either I'm going to say, I'm dirty, you are this. So now I'm going to become critical
right.
back to you, and we're going to ping pong until it's World War III. Or I'm going to say, going into martyr mode, you don't care about me. I was doing this all day. You're going into that victimhood consciousness. Doesn't really
Right.
resolve the problem because you haven't acknowledged the other person's pain or dilemma. So criticism and defensiveness are two things we want to avoid. The third one is we briefly talked about it. It's stonewalling. So what is stonewalling? And men tend to stonewall more. It means my body is in a state of physiological flooding. I want to say something, but nothing comes out. And oftentimes, women will be like, hello, am I talking to a wall? Like, where are you? It's not that he's not paying attention. It's just the speed at which the information came to him is much faster than he can process. And I'm using he because, again, more men
Yeah, statistically,
experience it.
totally.
Yeah. And the reason being is, as women, we've always like been around, circles where we're talking about our emotions. We're much more familiar with the process of expressing emotions because it was normalized as kids, whereas it wasn't normalized for men. So physiological flooding, when it happens, no matter what you say, goes in one ear and goes out the other. Your partner doesn't have the capacity to process it in that moment. In that moment, you need to give that person a timeout. If you're noticing them, experiencing that, you express a timeout. If the person who's experiencing the physiological flooding, then also the onus is on them to say, T or stop or pause because they know that they don't have the capacity and the nervous system to continue this conversation. So fighting fair is if I see my partner experiencing that, I'm going to take a step back. That's the third one. And the fourth one is contempt. And contempt is what the Gottman Institute sees as the biggest predictor of divorce. And that's where like there's no more respect present in the relationship. There's nonverbal contempt and verbal. So verbal is sarcasm, belittling. Were you raised in a barn that you're this dirty? What kind of family
Yeah.
were you in? This like holier than thou um,
Hmm.
attitude.
Indignation. Yeah.
Yes. And nonverbal is rolling your eyes, sighing, smirking at that moment, and I also want to be create space for grace because I've done all
I
four.
was gonna say everyone does some of these
Oh,
sometimes. We're
yes.
human.
Yes. And we all have a go-to horseman. So it's the one that we tend to grasp for during conflict. And again, it's because of how we were conditioned, the environment we grew up in. If we grew up in a household where one parent was very critical, we tend to pick up on that language. So you are who you are because of what you've been through. But when you know better, you can do better. So knowing these four horsemen is so powerful because awareness is key. Like hearing me, oh, maybe I'm, my go-to horseman is defensiveness. Great. So what's the antidote of defensiveness? It's taking accountability. I understand. Let's work on a solution together. I can understand how frustrating that is when you come home and this part of the house is a mess. Let's figure out a way that we can, you know,
Right.
fix it together, solve it together
Like
as a
you said,
team.
us versus the problem.
Yes, us versus the problem. Again, oh, I notice my go-to is stonewalling. Okay, maybe I need to figure out a sign language that I can tell my partner to go for a pause. If my go-to is criticism, I need to learn how to express myself without attacking the character. So, hey, when I come home and the dishes are unwashed, I feel so anxious. Can we figure out a solution? So, this is fighting fair. Fighting fair is recognizing what your go-to horseman is, learning the antidote and practicing it and practicing methods of repair so that when I messed up, hey, I noticed I was really critical early on with you. I want to apologize. Can we try this conversation again? Accountability is one of the sexiest traits that any partner can bring with them into a relationship.
Wow. The way you laid it out is just so good. There were so many different things that were going off in my head as I was hearing all of that. Like, often two people think that they're communicating, but really neither of them actually got across what they were trying to say. So, did a communication truly take place if neither of them accomplished it? I noticed how clearly you brought up the you statements, and then you kind of subtly showed in your example I statements. I
Mhm.
feel this way when, and how that subtle shift made such a big difference in it. So I guess I'll pick your brain on this. One I've been trying to use, and I've seen some pretty good success with, I actually got it from Brene Brown, was instead of saying, you're doing this, if I catch myself jumping to a conclusion, saying either an I statement or the story I'm telling myself is that you are upset with me about this. Do you feel that that's helpful? Should I tweak it a little bit? Is that a helpful approach or?
Mm. Thank you, David, for sharing that. Such a good approach because it's our stories of each other that are in the playing field, right? The story I'm telling myself, this is how I'm perceiving it. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is how I'm understanding it. Um, and I want to use an example related to Valentine's Day. If you have this belief, again, everything goes back to beliefs. If I have a belief that if someone loves you, they'll spend money on you. Okay. This is a belief that I have.
Sure.
My partner comes and says, oh, I planned a picnic for us. Okay. So, because they have a belief that when you love someone, you plan experiences for them. So, these are two different beliefs that are coming into a relationship. Very, very common. Now, in that moment, it would make the world of a difference if one partner goes, listen, the story I'm making up in my mind is you don't love me. That's why you didn't get me an expensive gift. Help me understand. Tell me more about your beliefs. Show me what was your thought process. And again, we're being very curious. It's like, the whole point of a relationship is every single day you want to set an intention to get to know the internal state of your partner. What's going on in their mind? Your sentence was so powerful. Like, this is the story I'm making. And guess what? The partner is going to be like, no, 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 that's not at all. In fact, I thought
That's
if I
usually
do
how it
this
goes.
experience, I thought if I do this experience, you're going to think I love you more. It's more thoughtful than buying you a gift. Oh, great. Yes, but I actually value gifts. I love that. What can we do to meet each other halfway? Maybe for Valentine's Day, we could do material stuff. And then maybe for our anniversary, we can do experiences. This is compromise. But you're not going to get to that point unless you have that very vulnerable share of this is the story that is in my mind. Correct me if I'm wrong. Help me understand. So thank you for sharing that.
Okay, so I'm gonna flip it around on myself because I shared something that I thought would be helpful, but I wanted to see if you had any, tweaks or feedback. So I'm glad that that's a good one. I'll keep using it. Something in my own relationship that I am trying to work on is I think sometimes I have trouble letting something go. Not like from an angry standpoint, but just like I feel like it has to be fully resolved. Like we have to fully talk everything out. And I think there are times where it would probably just be better if we let it go.
Mm-hmm.
Am I off base there? What would you say
Mm-hmm.
there? Because I can feel times where I am extending something beyond what it needs to be as a result of this drive. And it's something I'd like to work on.
Mm-hmm. Oftentimes, there's context for everything, but oftentimes when we have a hard time letting something go, it's because we don't feel heard for why we feel the way we feel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's, yep.
I want to feel heard. I want to feel validated. And here is the nuance. It's people think if I validate you, it means I agree with you. No, you can validate someone and not agree with them. That's okay. Validation is the true definition of empathy is I I I see you the way you want to be seen. I hear you the way you want to be heard. Tell me more about that. Tell me more about your experience, right? And I understand. I understand why you feel the way you feel. Doesn't mean I agree with it, but I understand it. And just, when someone feels understood that, hey, I'm not crazy for feeling this way, or there's not something wrong with me for feeling this way, then I have more willingness, more openness to moving forward from it. But if I feel judged, judgment keeps us stuck usually.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And for the record, Hannah is a very good listener. It's not so much there. I think I just need to do a better job of embracing the difference between understanding and agreement. And I
Mhm.
think just that subtle mindset shift would definitely help me let go because I think there are times where she understands and I am not making that distinction. So
Mm.
thank you. I appreciate that. There was some really good insight there. I noticed you were talking about the nervous system a good amount before,
Mhm.
especially with the ice cube hack and the vagus nerve. And I'd like to dive into that a little more. How would you say that nervous system and regulation of it or how it overall works plays into our relationships? Do you feel that it's a major aspect or do you feel that it's not that related?
Nervous system regulation is the foundation of every relationship you have with every area of your life, from money. So, the amount of money that shows up in your life um, equates to how safe your body feels receiving that amount. meaning the more
Interesting.
I need to feel safe to receive that. Sometimes people think like, sometimes we're scared of our wishes coming true because we don't know how we're going to respond to it. Will this amount feel safe? And remember, anything that's unfamiliar does not feel safe to our body. That's why we repeat unhealthy patterns in relationships, in unhealthy habits. It's familiar, but familiar doesn't always mean good. But
Right.
that's so with money, it's how much feels safe for me to hold, for me to have. Will or do I think that if I get a lot of money, people are going to use me? You know, my I'm I'm going to change my character. All these different beliefs that we might have. So even with money, it's the root of it. But with relationships, the reason it is the foundation of it is I cannot be myself if I'm dysregulated. I cannot be graceful as much as I'd like to be. I cannot be compassionate as much as I'd like to be. And in conflict, I literally cannot hear anything. So again, there's so much research on when someone is dysregulated, when you're speaking to them, they cannot process it. The part of their brain that processes information shuts down.
Right.
So I can't communicate. We can't have conflict resolution. And that's more and more ruptures happening. So that's in terms of relationship with someone else. Same applies with your coworkers.
Right.
When you're in like that stressed out mood, I notice it. I'm like, when I'm in that frustrated, dysregulated state, someone breathes loud next to me. I'm like staring at them. I'm like, why are you breathing? So it really does impact our capacity, our window of tolerance. So our window of tolerance is our ability to handle challenges. The smaller it gets, the less we're able to navigate it and handle it. And again, window of tolerance becomes smaller the more dysregulated we are, the less proactive we are with regulation work. So think of it this way. The more you work on nervous system regulation, the more proactive you become with it. So just reminding yourself, take slow, deep breaths throughout the day, do some tapping, do some grounding, do some shaking, regulate yourself. The more you're able to navigate life's inevitable challenges with a little bit more grace, with a little bit more ease. So it really does impact every area of your life.
I'm just kind of reflecting. We've talked about this concept of filling up your inner cup
Mhm.
so that you can pour out into the other people and important things in your life. And there's a lot of different ways that you can fill that up. Paradoxically, service is one of those ways.
Mhm.
Confidence, self-esteem, self-compassion, some of the positive psychology, 6 human needs, mindfulness. But it sounds like nervous system regulation is really a big one for that. If you don't have your nervous system under that regulation, it's very hard to show up for other people because, like you said, certain parts of your brain are literally turned off during that,
Mhm.
making you not show up in the way that you wish you would in those situations, given hindsight 2020. And I know it's been talked about more recently in the public, but I still feel that that is really an under appreciated and under talked about issue,
Mhm.
especially because, and not that we're going to get super deep into that, but trauma can have a
Mhm.
huge effect on your nervous system.
Yes.
And many of us have capital T, like big T trauma and little t
Mhm.
traumas. And those all have effects on our nervous system that often make us, like you said, act in ways that
Mhm.
aren't how we want to. And a lot of times those things can explain why you're like, why did they just do that? That makes no sense. Well, you don't know what else happened in their life that, causes them to react that way in that specific situation.
Yeah.
Getting a little off topic here, but I just really wanted to hammer home that like you and I agree wholeheartedly on this one that nervous system regulation is such a huge factor. At different points in the conversation, we've talked about expressing our needs. So
Mhm.
I kind of want to touch on that for a little bit if you're cool with it.
Yeah, of course.
Um, how does the topic of vulnerability, especially in the context of a relationship with a partner, relate to getting your needs met? And are there important things people should know about how or when and if you should share your needs with your partner?
Loved if. Um, Relational safety is the number one prerequisite for vulnerability, meaning I feel safe to share, knowing that what I share you will not use against me in the future. So,
Yeah,
this is so important, and the body is so wise. Pay attention to how your body feels in that moment. Do you notice yourself, closing your hands? Do you notice your shoulders, uh, you know, uh, being hunched? Because you will feel if you feel safe with this person or not, right? Again, body is the smartest entity to go.
right.
Although sometimes the body can, the body holds score. So previous trauma can manifest in different ways. So yes, there are
Right.
exceptions, but generally speaking, body is smart. So pay attention to how your body is feeling with that person. Do I feel safe with this person? Do I feel emotionally safe? Meaning, is this person a non-judgmental person? When I've shared with them before, have they been receptive to receiving it? Because if I keep sharing and you keep pushing it off, I'm not going to want to share anymore because my sharing is not understood, is not valued, is not seen. So, relational safety is key. Ask yourself, do I feel safe? Now, if I feel safe, when is when we both have the capacity and the time. This is really important. People think just because their partner has time, it means that they have the capacity to hear you out. So just ask, like, hey, like, do you have the capacity right now to have a serious conversation? Or, hey, I want to talk to you
Right.
about something. When is a right time? When is a good time for you? Um, like, I have a lot on my plate tonight. Do you want to grab lunch tomorrow? Do you want to talk over dinner? So, like, really asking that person, getting an invitation to when you want to share. We don't want to just dump on our partners because if your partner had a really shitty day at work and they come home and you dump it on them because they've had a shitty day at work, they might snap at you, right? And they're like, or they might respond in a different way. Now, in that moment, you feel that this person doesn't care for me. They don't love the relationship. They're not invested. Now there's a rupture from both ends, and it kind of turns into a lose lose situation. But if the partner comes home and you're like, hey, honey, like, can we talk about something? They're like, I had a really shitty day at work. Can we do this tomorrow? That's how you're setting yourself up for success. You're setting each other up for success, yourself and the relationship. So that's the when. And then the how, again, we go back to the I language. I feel this way. I feel so seen. I feel so valued. I feel so appreciated when you do that. Can we have a little bit more of that? So, like when you plan date nights, I feel so valued. Can you schedule some more of that for us, please? That versus you don't care about me. You never plan anything. You don't love me. Because you say that, the person's like, no, I do love you. But now I'm getting defensive. Nothing I
Right.
do for you is enough. I give up. So
Hmm.
language is so powerful. And two things I would say avoid when expressing your needs. Two words that are like just throw it out of your vocabulary. Always, never.
Yeah.
It negates it.
Infinitives.
Ooh, you always do this? They're going to remember the one time they didn't do it. I always do that. Do you not remember that? Or you never do this. They're going to remember the time they did do it. You're not grateful. Don't you remember X, Y, and Z?
Hmm. Every time that yeah, no.
Dangerous. Dangerous. Stay away from those two words.
We talk a lot about shades of gray on this podcast. I have these kind of 5 core fundamentals. Not that I'm going to go through all of them, but that is a big part of them because it helps you see things with balance. It helps you have some flexibility and not see things in extremes. And infinitives force you into an extreme, even if that's not how it actually is. So I want to point out a nuance. You made a very clear distinction between the I and the you again, and it was very powerful. But it wasn't just the switch of the I and the you. I noticed that you actually switched from pointing out the lack, because you could always say, I feel underappreciated when this doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed that you reframed it to getting the same point across, but with a positive with the I statement. When this happens, I feel appreciated, which
Mm-hmm.
is trying to incentivize more of the good thing as opposed to bringing down the hammer on the bad thing and shaming the person. Because shame is often a pretty terrible long-term motivator. If somebody feels like crap about themselves, they don't have a lot of mental energy to go do the things. And I've just had light bulb after light bulb. Having this conversation with you has just been fantastic. I have learned so much. Everyone listening to this, there is so much value. If you didn't get it all, go back and listen to this one again. You have just been wonderful throughout this whole podcast. But I want to touch on a couple things. You actually have your own podcast. It's called Minutes on Growth, right? And
Yeah.
that's been around for far longer than we've been around here at the Sage Solutions podcast, 2017. So
Mm-hmm.
well pre-pandemic.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah,
Absolutely.
you are a very well-established podcast with community around it. And do you have anything else you would like to share? Any nuggets of wisdom or like small little specific things for Valentine's Day specifically?
Okay. So one thing I would like to say is really over, you know, well, two things. One is set boundaries for yourself around social media, because what you see on social media isn't necessarily, the true
Yep.
experience of
Expectate.
what you're
Yep.
seeing. Yeah. So
100%.
set some boundaries around that. Just remind yourself that, not everything you see is exactly as it is. So, and don't, because, when we go on social media, the inner critic creates some comparisons, which then, negative thoughts lead to negative feelings lead to negative actions, and this loop kind of continues. So have those boundaries and really just spend some time with your inner child, even if you're in a relationship. Like every day, I like to ask myself, what do you want to do? Like, what do you want right
Yeah.
now? What do you want to eat? Just kind of really cultivating a strong connection with yourself, because again, as cliche as it sounds, the relationship you have with yourself is the foundation of the relationship you have with others, and the relationship you have with your nervous system is the foundation of the relationship you have with yourself. So it's like, the Russian dolls,
Yep.
you pull one out
Circle.
and
Yep.
there's another
Yep. Yep.
one inside of
No,
it.
it all comes
So
around.
just taking some time this week, it's self-care isn't just bubble baths. It's you sitting down and taking slow, deep breaths. It's you putting your feet on grass if you're somewhere that's warm. It's you drinking water. It's you splashing cold water on your face. It's these small moments. It's not the grand gestures. And I think I could link this to Valentine's Day as well. The health of a relationship is not determined by like the
Grandiose.
big grand gestures, right? Those like once a year gestures. No, it's accumulation of the small, consistent gestures. It's the same with ourselves. We don't suddenly heal and change by going to, that one class or reading that one book. It's that accumulation, that consistent action and effort that we put into ourselves. So I know the marketing of Valentine's Day wants you to focus on that one big gesture, but notice the small ways your partner is showing up for you, that you're showing up for you, that your friends are showing up for you. Show appreciation and cultivate those. it's a better investment in the long term if you
Yeah.
focus on the small gestures, consistent gestures.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So for that day too, you might have a bigger thing planned, but don't only focus on that bigger thing. Throughout the day, send those little texts, those little reminders, do little things, touch all those different love languages. That makes a lot of sense. And the consistency, that is so big. Don't just immediately drop all of that the day after Valentine's Day and have it not mean anything. So I have two more questions for you. First of all, do you have any questions for me before we wrap it up here?
So, since it's Valentine's Day and I know how much you honor your wife, um, I'd love for you to share with us one thing that you're grateful for in your marriage.
I am grateful that I get to spend every day with my best friend, with somebody that makes me feel so loved and who is just so fun to just do silly things with. It's not always about the serious stuff. I am so grateful that I can just be a goofball with her and that she feels safe enough to do the same with me. I've got to say that's something I'm incredibly grateful for.
I love that. The safety. You touched on relational safety, you touched on acceptance, you touched on, feeling comfortable being yourself, the other person. Touched on so many of those elements. I love that. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, no, thank you. So, Tannaz, you do relationship coaching. You do a lot of different stuff. I heard ebooks. Where can somebody find you? Where can somebody connect with you if they were interested in maybe looking into some of your services or some of the material that you produce or your podcast? How can people connect with you?
Thanks for asking. So everywhere on Minutes on Growth. So website is minutesongrowth.com. Instagram, TikTok, all of those are Minutes on Growth. If you go on my website, there's an ebook on 11 tools for nervous system regulation. There's simple, really practical tools that you can try out, see what works for you. Create your toolbox, put all of these different modalities and tools in there so you're always prepared and you can reach out for the one that resonates most in that moment of trigger. So I have that ebook. Podcast is the same. And yeah, just all platforms, Minutes on Growth. And, feel free, DM me. I love connecting with people, hearing their stories. And I hope the content serves you and really enables you to build healthier relationships because, the Harvard research shows that our experience of reality is most impacted by the quality of our relationships. So we can create better relationships. We can enjoy life more. We can be better friends. We can be better partners. We can be better, siblings and children and parents and everything.
Well, thank you for coming on today and sharing so much free value right before a time of love and connection with our loved ones. It's been a real pleasure having you on. Thank you once again, Tannaz.
Thank you, David.
And remember, you are enough, and you deserve to fill up your inner cup with happiness, confidence, and self-compassion. Thank you for listening to the Sage Solutions podcast. Your time is valuable, and I'm so glad you choose to learn and grow here with me. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on more sage advice. One last thing. The legal language. This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. No coaching-client relationship is formed. It is not intended as a substitute for the personalized advice of a physician, professional coach, psychotherapist, or other qualified professional. The opinions of guests are their own and may not necessarily reflect the opinions of the podcast.